Hello, everybody. Welcome to TJKshares. One-on-one with TJK. It's been a while. We decided in 2025 we will bring you quality guests who are going to share their experiences, but also we'll bring you an episode a month. That means, ladies and gentlemen, you have an entire month of watching, rewatching, sharing with everybody because we don't bring you anybody here who is not going to touch your life in a positive way and influence you. You get to this channel to learn and relearn some things. This morning, ladies and gentlemen, as we get into another episode on TJK Shares, we are excited to be hosting a person I call young brother, a person who came here in our community in Michigan, where we had so many people come from different places, who speaks the same language as mine, a person who does work that is transformational in nature, but also driven and determined in every word and sense of the word determination. Welcome, Professor Dr. Ronald Asiimwe to TJKshares. Please greet the people in any way you want. You can even put in Agandi Mugamba Chabo Witu, and then we'll get this conversation going. People are excited to hear about your journey, to hear about your background, and to be inspired. While you learn, we learn from you. We also get to learn from each other as we share. Welcome to the channel.
Thank you so much. I'm deeply humbled, TJK, that you have me here. Thank you for hosting me. Bana Uganda mbalamusiza, those of us who can speak Luganda. Abakumanyoli nyankore na abaramusia mnonga basebo na banyabo. Iwano kwatabasu zitezu kuzambara ribanda kanungu. Greetings to you. Nabe Buganda namwe mbabuziza. I happen to come from both tribes, so I can speak Runyankore and Luganda very well. But really, TJK, thank you for having me here. This is a show that I love so much. I watch every video you put out there. You are such an inspiration. And definitely, I'm glad you could invite me to be a guest on your show. Thank you.
And true to the word, Ronald, I'm really, really excited and happy to have you because, like you say, you have watched every show and commented and got back to give me reviews. This channel has grown on your eyes. I started it when you were here at Michigan State University in Michigan. For those of us from Ibanda, Kanungu, Rukunjiri, Mbarara, Neruwo, Tubalamusiza, Mwena, we come from so far away. I'm recording this in my home in Michigan, United States. Our guest is reaching to us from Minnesota. Those are mid-states in the United States. We are both people who have come here for opportunities, as you will hear. So thank you for sharing your time, and thank you for watching so many episodes. Let's dive into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Ronald Asiimwe is coming to us from Minnesota. We are going to first get to know where he came from by hearing his background, his journey from Ibanda to becoming a professor. Tell us the background. Dig into mommy and daddy, dig into the bus trips, dig into Kampala times. You can tell I know the story, but I don't.
You know the story. Yes.
Tell us that. And this mostly, when we are talking about this story, we have so many young people who watch this channel and say, you know what, Jackson Kaguri, Sarongo, CEO, professor, accomplished, God just grabbed him and threw him in this world. They forget how many miles I walked on foot to go to school. And Zitozina Arguire, you wake up and you have to take Renzito out and then walk limping
Yes.
the grass.
Nakapira keberere.
Akapira kebirere n'ebichinja bebwo kumwabire mwibe bikwijo mujya abana muri sizembuzi We are there at one point, ladies and
Yes.
gentlemen, young people.
Yes.
We do
Yes.
know we have high-class people who grew up in flats of Gorobi. We have
Yes.
interviewed others here too. But for us who come from the village level, we want
Mm,
kid who is there now to
mm.
understand it is possible. To a background, that ninyo nazo mukugambisibwa.
Yes, thank you. It is possible. Thank you so much. My background is huge. I am actually writing a book about my story, so I'm gonna try and share little bits of my background. So I was born and raised on a small village of Ibanda. The village is called Igorora, to be specific. Yeah, it's the only village that it's known on Ibanda and Mbarara Highway. It's known for good bananas, emeneche, the small ones and the big ones, bogoya, kabalagala, passion fruits. So if you're traveling from Kampala to Kamwenge or to Ibanda, you go through that village, you will know. That's where when the bus stops, women will run to the buses, or children, or even now men. I sold corn, maize on that village as well. But I grew up on that village. I love it so much. I'm still very connected. It has now grown. When I was growing up, it used to be Mbarara district, and now the village of Igorora is in Ibanda district. It's now grown. I think when I was growing up, it was maybe a couple of families. I would say, less than 500 people. But now, every time I go back, there's many people. It's expanded. There was no electricity growing up on that village. There was no tarmac road. The first tarmac road I remember was 1999. That's when they tarmacked Mbarara Ibanda Highway, and that was like a tourist attraction for kids like me on the village who used to go to sell maize on the bus, standing in the dust. So if you're a village kid, these stories might excite you, but also if you're a Kampala kid. So my childhood was really humble. I never grew up in flushing toilets. I used the latrine, I can go on and on and on. My parents were poor. My dad never lived home. My dad worked in Kampala. And so we saw him, I think, once or twice a year. And that was the big holidays, Easter and Christmas. And I remember my dad used to smoke, Rex to be specific, cigarette. And that was and that was a high-end cigarette then. So if you smelled Rex on the village, dad has come. And there was one bus, I think it's now out of business with the new roads and everything, but it was called Janda. So we'd all wait for Janda to wait for dad, because by then there were no telephones, so he couldn't call that he's coming, right? Mom would write a letter and it would take, weeks to arrive in Kampala. And so we just had to wait and hope that he was coming on Easter or Christmas. So that's a kind of village I grew up. My mother was a small subsistence farmer, and I say was because unfortunately she's no longer with us. She left us when I was age 12 in 2001. That's a story that I will get into. It's part of my motivation, inspiration, and why I'm here. But she raised us. So thank you, Mama. I tear up when I talk about her because she was a very strong woman. She raised most of us on her own. Dad was always gone, and she had children that she had with my father, but she also had my father's children. So I grew up in a household of 7 children, but in total we're 12. Yeah. My dad had 12. I like to joke that if you know football, soccer, for those of us in the US, we had a soccer team and 1 substitute. So my dad had 12 children, but unfortunately a few of them have passed away. So in my house, we were about 7. And I shared my same mom, same dad with my 2 siblings. And then I had a half sister who was my mother's daughter. And then the others were my father's children. But one of the things I loved about my mother was she never, like growing up, I never knew these were my half sisters. We were all sisters and brothers. I never knew anything until she passed. That's when I got to know. But my beginning was very humble. My mom was a farmer, and she also was what is okuruke bitambara? She made table mats and knitting and
weaving and knitting.
Weaving, yes, okuruke bitambara. So she was a a weaver, and she used to make money out of selling table mats, couch covers, and farming, selling crops. And so it was a really humble beginning. And for those first 12 years of my life, she's the one we had, and she was the first person to call me professor. So she's the reason I'm here. I still hold her to my heart. I used to have so many questions. Why this? Why that? And she was like, you have so many questions. Ronald, you'll be a professor one day and you'll have all your questions answered. So may her soul rest in eternal peace. That really stuck with me. My mother, just, how she was resilient and hardworking and taught us a lot of the things I'll be sharing here. So eventually, from that village, the story of leaving the village and coming to Kampala. So age 0 to 13, I was in the village, Igorora Ivanda. I went to school, my first primary school. We didn't have shoes. So I went to school for 5 years. I think only candidates, primary 7 students, those who are about to graduate to go to high school or secondary school, as we call it in Uganda, were the ones who were allowed to wear shoes. So my first pair of shoes was when I was in P6, primary 6 and primary 7, was then your candidate. And I do remember going to school barefoot. We would go from, my school was about maybe half a mile away, so not far, half a mile away from home. But we used to walk, we used to get together as kids of, families in the neighborhood and walk together to school. My mother would pack for us food, and by then there were no, freezers or so. You go to school to Arenta and Ayawe.
And
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. My sister who was in primary 7, I believe at the time, she was the first one who got like a food container. And that was, yes, and that was a big deal in the school. Because everyone else had the Ntanda every day, you'd pack your food in banana fibers. And then when you get to school, you'd keep the food in a collective place. So all the children had to put their food in one place. Like there was no I keep my food, you keep my food. Like in America, children here have separated places where they keep their bags and school items. There, lunchtime, they would ring the bell and all the kids, you run to go to the same room to get your own tanda. And you pray and hope nobody steals your food. So you had to really mark it very well. So ladies and gentlemen, that's kind of my background. I can go on. There's more other stories, but as we go along, they will come out. So I remember taking my first bus to Kampala, the same Janda. We used to call it Janda every day. So the Janda has brought them, because it was the only bus that was even under Kampala. And that bus ride was long because it was not a tarmac road. The first time I went to Kampala, I remember my father, I was in primary 4, 1999. He came that Christmas and he said, if you get first grade, I'll bring you to Kampala to see Kampala for the first time. I was like, I'm getting first grade. I was a sharp kid in school, and so I worked hard to get my first grade. And I used to read a lot at night, and mind you, there was no electricity, so we used to use a tar called a tadova. What's a tadova in English? Now this is where I need you, TJK. Yes.
It is the candle made out of old tins.
Yes, candle made out of old tins.
And kerosene in. So people use them for camping here. We use them.
Yes. That's how I got my education done, my revising to get my first gift to go to Kampala. And when I got my first grade, I remember I did not sleep for about 2 days because I could not wait for my father. There was no phones. So we had to wait at the day he would come, I'll go to Kampala. So eventually he made it happen. I went to Kampala for the first time on Janda, and I remember I did not sleep. I remember my head was out looking in the window, just very amazed at how the bus was moving. It was just like a whole experience, It took us about, 2 hours to get to Mbarara. Right now it's like a 30-minute drive, Mbarara Ivanda, because it's about 50 kilometers. But then it was like a 2 hour bus ride. And as a child, that's fun. So yeah, so I took my first bus to go to Kampala to just, see it. I remember I was there for like a week. My one of my sisters lived there, so when I arrived, my dad took me to my sister. That's my dad's daughter, so we share a father, but not mother. And I was there. Harriet is her name, Harriet Nakarembe. If you ever watch this show, she was the first one who hosted me in Kampala, and I remember I did not sleep for 2 nights in Kampala because I'd never seen electricity. So I was like, when is everything going to go dark? So anyway, so I went to Kampala for that first time, and I remember when I went to Kampala, I spent there about maybe 2 weeks, and then I went back to the village. And I remember when I was on that bus going back, saying to myself, this is where I need to be back. This is where I want to become and do my secondary school. And it was a dream come true. So I worked hard, and eventually, yes.
Ronald, the light had been lit.
Yes.
Since we are in the United States, we can use the switch had been plugged into the light, and now you can feel it. And when
Yes.
we speak about these things, Ronald, I want to direct a little bit and go to that inspiration. Your dad is living in Kampala, you are in Eva, and abigorora, by the way, twabalamusa ntwenda mugure nanka data mulebe mwana wanyu leba ngugu Ronald.
Oh yes, thank you.
When you talk of Igorora who was Aliwe, and you talk about your father living far away, that is foreign to many people in this country. Where we come from, many left home to go work so far away and provided. And the instinct of your dad smoking Rex, he comes back, you smell Rex, Ronald's dad is izina ryeye bakani bamweto hamuhereze ekitinisa kye yekakiriho bishi muzeyi kanamurebera no kumureba mama
Yes.
kama yatwire muzeyi kurarebe program ya mutabani wawe nitukusiye webale kurore manzi no kuzara abana babiri soccer team yona football.
Yes.
Yaba Arsenal chonka nico turi kubafana imwe, but otherwise good, well done.
Thank Mzee Kafumba Sylvester. Yes, Mzee Kafumba Sylvester, webale mnonga okutuleeta omunsi, and for giving me the platform to be who I am. Yes, he will be part of the story later along as we go along.
Let's talk about you've gone back, you have an inspiration from your father, you have your mom, your late mom, rest in peace, who kuruke bitambara. Ubwo bitambara they would put them on the chairs, on the sofas.
Yes.
Paka hasi rero kisa kusitamaho bakutera ngo wijogurire wastamante. Those were your initial inspiration. Young people, listen to us.
Yes.
While you are looking for Premier League, Liverpool is on top of the table, Manyangwenchi. Your inspiration is in the house where you live.
Yes.
The mom, dad, right there. Watch this you want to watch. But those people on TV are not going to be your inspiration. We are here to tell you that because we've lived it.
Yes.
What are motivating the things they are telling you in your house, the people who are in your life are your inspiration and are the things you will remember.
Yes.
Through the journey. Because as we speak to you, we've already given up your story. You are a professor. Nyokwakario Moranji. Prophet.
Yes. She was a prophetess.
She's so
right
before you can even envision it. And you worked towards her prophecy and you have fulfilled. Thank God, amen and amen. Tell us how you ended up choosing to become a family therapist and why you chose mental health as a career. Why?
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, that's another part of the book. Thank you, Jackson. So currently I am, this is now introducing myself, currently what I do. I am currently an assistant professor. Assistant professor in Uganda would be maybe junior lecturer. It's an entry position in a research university in the US. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Family Social Science at the University of Minnesota, which is located in the Twin Cities. The Twin Cities is Minneapolis and St. Paul. right in the heart of Minnesota, which is one of the coldest states in North America. Michigan was cold where I did my PhD work. That's where I met TJK. But Minnesota is another level of cold. It is still cold here, and as we speak, it's May 1st, but we're still in the 40s, and so 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is I think like 10 Celsius, if my math serves me
Ladies
well.
and gentlemen, that is why Ronald is wearing a shirt.
Yes.
T-shirt inside. He has a shirt. He has a
Yes.
sweater and a coat. Michigan
Yes.
is now beautiful, but Minnesota is colder. Yes.
So what inspired me? How did I end up in family therapy? So as I said, I'm an assistant professor of couple and family therapy, and family therapy is a field that really thinks about mental health problems from a relational context. So we not only don't think about if I have a mental health challenge, let's say I have depression or I have anxiety, it does not only affect me, it affects me and my connection, my relationship, my aunties, my uncles, my friends, right? So that's the job of a family therapist, is to really understand people in the context of their relationships and what they are struggling with in the context of their relationships. So for me, that was an inspiration really. I will go back to my village a little bit. Growing up on my village, I love that village so much, Igorora, the people of Igorora. God bless you. But growing up again, I saw this other side on the village. I saw violence on the village. I saw both in homes and at school. In my own home, my father was amazing to my mother, but because he was always gone, there's this uncle, rest his soul in eternal peace, he passed. My uncle, who was an alcoholic, and he was ex-military, so he would, for some reason, we were young, but he did not like my mother, and he would go get drunk and would come home and beat my own mother. So that's an in-law, right? His brother's wife. And I remember as a child watching that, and it never made sense. So there's violence in my own home perpetrated by my own uncle, who, for those of us who have uncles, you'd hope that an uncle is a safe figure. Everyone wants to run to an uncle, get a hug. My uncle was not like that. He was the opposite. And then I also saw the same in communities. On the same village, I saw women who are being battered by their husbands. I remember even at nights, I would hear people crying, and I'm like, what's happening? And you wake up and it's a neighbor beating their wife, right? I saw the same pattern in schools where I attended Igororade Primary School. That's a school where I used to go barefoot. And I remember some teachers who would be violent towards children. I remember this teacher who beat my friend. Actually, there's a teacher, this is a sad story, but there's a teacher who beat a child until she died. That teacher is still in jail. So, yes, the teacher beat a child until she died. And so he's in jail now, life imprisonment. But such stories for me, when I watch that, I watch people being hurt by the ones they were responsible for. Teachers are responsible for taking care of their children. I watched parents beat their children for something as small as, in my opinion, we can disagree on this, but breaking a glass. I'm like, it's a glass. Come on. It's not the end of the world. So I had a question of, why do people hurt people they love? Why would I beat my wife? Why would I beat my children for something as small as a glass is broken? Why would I be a teacher and inflict pain to students in a classroom to the point of death? So for me, as a little boy, I didn't have answers to that, but I remember saying to myself, when I grow up, I want to have a solution to this. I want to figure out why people commit heinous acts against people they love. These are not strangers. These are people you're with in the community. You love them. And mind you, some teachers would say, I'm beating you so that you be a very good child, an upright child. And I'm like, I get it, but to the point of death, when am I going to be an upright child? I was a very timid child, so I never got in trouble with kids, with teachers, because I saw what would happen to my friends, and I was like, I was your yes kid. So that was inspirational, and that's very important, because for me, that's where it started, on my village. I saw something wrong. I saw violence, and I said, something has to be done. And so I started just wondering about that, and that curiosity just turned into a lifelong story and quest to get to understand relationships, understand how trauma impacts people, and eventually how healing happens in people's relationships, in the context of their relationships. That's what led me to family therapy, ladies and gentlemen. I'll stop here.
And it led you to family therapy. Did you study it at Makerere University? Then I heard from the grapevine you were in Oklahoma. Then you ended up in Michigan. We will touch on just how you got to be where you are.
Yeah.
And in the second part of our recording, we'll go deeper. But before we even go there, mental health and therapy.
Yes. Mm.
Burunyankole Ruchiga, mental health ne bajeteje.
Someone asked me on my graduation. So I did my bachelor's, my first degree was in psychology, mental health and community psychology. Really, when you think about mental health, it is easy way to think about it is
Yes.
you know, it doesn't mean but we all have thoughts, we have feelings,
Thank
you
you.
know. So for me, that's how I think about mental health.
That's why I asked you the question. It is
Yes.
a question I already know the answer, but I wanted you to describe it because the person who is sitting in Nyakajezi, where I was born and raised,
Yes.
Nigoro Ralinzi the bus says episode.
Eh,
In our communities, ladies and gentlemen, to all our listeners, when you have mental health that comes out extreme, the word is called abashazi. You are a mad person.
yes.
Because people think of mental health as a mad person, they think you have to be taking off your clothes, running around naked to be having mental health. And there's even a hospital in Uganda called Butabika. The word Butabika means they put you there and cover you up, you will never be seen again. What our professor, assistant professor, is telling us, and you all need to know, every human being has those thoughts that disturb us. And when
Yes.
you look at the trauma we went through, whether that teacher who beat that student, bless his heart, that teacher has a mental issue that was
Yes.
not
Addressed.
or identified. It was that teacher's trauma that will impacted the death of the other child. And so, ladies
Yes.
and gentlemen who are listening to us, especially on our African continent and brothers and sisters, mental health is real. We all deal with it. In our later conversations, when we go deeper, we'll get there. But I wanted us to understand. There's a
Yes.
book I just finished reading on last trip when I was to Uganda. We are all walking trauma. We are all walking traumas. Everyone.
Yes.
It affects
Yes.
differently.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there is help.
Yes.
That is where you
Yes.
will come in our second part and tell us where that help is. So you went
Yes.
to Makerere University, studied psychology. Then what happened?
I remember that's funny that you asked me then what happened. So I studied psychology, and after I studied psychology, because for me going to study psychology was really to understand. One, I also wanted to understand my own father. I was like, I really didn't feel like I knew him. I was like, I want to know what my father was thinking, like, his behavior. I also wanted to understand people and why they were committing these, in my opinion, acts of crime against the people they love, beating your wife or beating a child to the point of death. We'll talk about that in the second part. So I studied after that. After my degree in psychology, it was hard to find a counseling job, because when you learn to be a psychologist, no umuhumuriza w'abantu. That's so I didn't find a job for several reasons. But after that experience, I started working for an organization in Uganda that was working with university students, and it was evangelism, there was discipleship. I grew up in a Christian environment, Christian home, and there was also mentorship. And so I was attached to two universities where I was working with students in their different fellowship groups, to talk about the Bible, but also talk about some challenges they were facing. And Jackson, let me say this, that is why the spark for family therapy for me continued. Because those students would meet, would have prayers, and whenever I'll say, tell me about your life, like, how is school going, how is home going, no more questions. I can tell you countless students at university who would break down, and they start breaking down, crying, and I ask them, what's going on, what has happened? And a lot of students would talk about the traumas in their families. I just got a phone call that my mother was kicked out of the house by my father, or I just got a phone call that my uncle murdered their wife, those kinds of things. And these were students at university. So they are still developing, but they are advanced. And so that's when I realized even the educated among the elites and, college, university students, that's when I was like, this need is important. So anyway, so I left that organization, but again, and Sugo was the seed was being sowed to continue on this path. So when I finished work with that organization, there was a friend who was in Tanzania, and he called me and he said, hey, actually a friend of mine connected us. Said this man is Ugandan, he's married in Tanzania, and him and his wife are starting a school, an English medium school. Tanzania, for those of us who might not know, Tanzania is one of those countries that speak Swahili as a national language. So English has been developing now. But they were looking for English teachers. So I went to Tanzania as a grade 1 teacher.
See, I didn't know that. This is why I like these interviews. I get idea.
Uh-huh.
You went to Tanzania, unasema Kiswahili. Oh, kidogo.
Yes, naongea Kiswahili vizuri. That's English. I speak Swahili very well. My Tanzanian...
Greet our Swahili speakers now. The Kenya, Tanzania, Sudan, Rwanda, Burundi. Ugandan who speak Swahili in Kiswahili.
Watu wetu wa East Afrika Mashariki na wasalimu sana. Asante sana for being friends. I'll stop there.
You went to Tanzania, you are teaching at a school.
So I went to Tanzania, I was teaching at a school. So I was first grade, I taught first graders. This was, and these were children from well-to-do families because they had to pay a fee. A lot of the teachers there were international teachers. We had teachers from Spain, America, Uganda, Kenya, and a few Tanzanians. And so the second year, the school head invited me in his office and said, wait, you have a degree in psychology? And I said, yes. We want a school counselor, and we're not going to hire a school counselor when you're here. So they moved me from, so I was sort of put in a program, they called it life skills training. But for me, it was really like, working with children who had behavior problems. And so I started saying, well, something is happening. And I remember a lot of kids would bring to me and they say, this child has a problem. And for those of us who don't know, a lot of schools in Africa, they will still beat children with behavior problems. Despite some governments banning it. I know that the government of Uganda put a ban on corporal punishment, but unfortunately some schools still do it. So those are the kids that would bring me. And so I started saying, I really need their parents. I need to talk to their parents. I don't know, how can a young child, 7-year-old, just wake up and beat the entire class, slap them? So my understanding with the little mental health training I got from Makerere was that whatever that child was manifesting something that was happening at home, and it was in their emotions, and they had bottled it up. They were just manifesting it. So I worked at that school for first year I was teaching, and then second year I sort of taught and also worked with children with behavior problems. And I started doing parent conferences, meeting their parents and talking about the things. So for me, so then fast forward, after that job, I did it for 2 years. After that job, I was like, I do need to get further education. I feel I need to start understand more about relationships and people, because I always believed in the African spirit of Ubuntu. We'll talk about it later. But that the idea that I am because we are, that whatever happens to me impacts, others. And similarly, when we're happy, my friends are happy, those around me are happy. So I met a guy from Texas, a man from Texas, and he was a missionary in Uganda. And I started talking to him about the job I was doing in Tanzania. So working with these kids with behavior problems in the classroom, outside of the classroom. And he said to me, "Have you heard of family therapy?" I said, "Tell me more," because I'd never heard of family therapy. I had psychology. And so he starts telling me, and he had his colleagues he was a hospice doctor, so end of life care doctor, who had a team that had family therapists, psychologists. So he's like, "Yeah, you should talk to my friend, who is a family therapist." And so unfortunately, we never got to talk with a friend, but that doctor, his name is Dr. Gregory Batha. He's a very good friend of mine. I call him my American dad. I'll share with him this interview to watch. So we started talking, and I said, yeah, when he told me about family therapy and he brought me a book to read, I said, yeah, I would really want to study this. I want to study family therapy. I want to understand people's relationships and how they impact their mental health and the likes. And so he's like, yeah, he literally just said, find a school and we will sponsor you. I was worried about how am I going to pay tuition in the US. Yeah. He was like, yeah, fine. Have you been saving? I said, I've been saving, but I was earning what, $300 at that school, $300, and I had other siblings, nephews take care of other family obligations. So I really didn't have money saved at the time. I had a little, but it wouldn't even buy an air ticket. And Dr. Batha was like, find a school, get admitted, we will pay for everything.
Perfect, perfect, perfect.
Yes.
Dr. Buster, ladies and gentlemen, has been to this house in Michigan for
Yes.
Ronald's graduation. An amazing man, very smart, always wearing his nice shirt and tie. And so, Dr. Butter, we thank
Yeah.
you, we greet you. Asante sana, webale mnonga, okwatirira ahamanzejo. That brings us to the end of our first part. We leave you for the best in the second part coming up following this interview. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please share, subscribe, and remember we are here to learn and relearn. For majority of men in Uganda, I hope you have learned that you have a mental health and there is help for it. And our assistant professor, family, problems in our heads that affect other relationships, your children, your wife, your brother, your sister, the teacher, people you drink with at the bar, people you jog with. We get issues, and Ronald studies on how to handle those. We thank you. Please tune in next week for another episode to finish how Ronald got from Tanzania to a university in the United States, and you can't be assistant professor unless you have a PhD. That's coming up. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you.
Thank you for having me, TJK.